He's the man who roared down television's mean streets as Jax Teller, the magnetic anti-hero of Sons of Anarchy, a role that made him a household name and cemented his place in pop culture history. Yet while contemporaries like Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Hardy have been showered with accolades and prestige projects, Charlie Hunnam's Hollywood journey has been strangely uneven. How can an actor with his range, charisma, and proven star power remain perched on the fringes of the A-list? This is Underrated Actors, the Charlie Hunnam story. Early signs of an underrated force. Charlie Hunnam's earliest screen work in late 1990s British television might have gone unnoticed, if not for his daring breakthrough in Queer as Folk, 1999. As Nathan Maloney, a 15-year-old exploring his sexuality, he delivered a raw, vulnerable honesty that few young actors could have carried without tipping into melodrama. Critics praised his performance as fearless, signaling that Hunnam had more to offer than good looks. Yet even here, the seeds of his underrated journey were sown. Instead of cementing himself as a rising star in British TV, he made the risky decision to leave for Los Angeles, chasing challenges that wouldn't always reward him with recognition. In Hollywood, the climb was steeper. Roles in Young Americans and Judd Apatow's Undeclared showcased his range in both drama and comedy, but industry doors rarely swing wide for unknowns without connections. Hunnam was the kind of actor who could nail auditions, yet watch projects collapse in development or see the final cut minimize his presence. His career seemed suspended in a frustrating limbo, flashes of talent, but without the platform to match. That frustration would become a recurring motif in his trajectory as one of Hollywood's most consistently overlooked talents. Sons of Anarchy, Breakthrough and Cage. Everything shifted in 2008 when FX cast him as Jax Teller in Sons of Anarchy. Initially far from the obvious choice, Hunnam approached the role with obsessive preparation, embedding himself with motorcycle clubs, mastering Harley-Davidsons, and studying the unspoken codes of outlaw brotherhood. On screen, he made Jax magnetic, volatile, yet vulnerable, a prince of chaos weighed down by morality. Critics described his work as a star turn hiding in plain sight, and fans formed a loyalty so fierce it bordered on cult devotion. Yet this defining role also became his paradox. Sons of Anarchy was his breakout, but it also became a cage. Casting directors struggled to see beyond the leather vest and haunted eyes. Even as the show dominated ratings and culture, Hollywood hesitated to crown him its next leading man. Unlike Bryan Cranston or Jon Hamm, who parlayed iconic TV roles into broader opportunities, Hunnam found himself typecast, boxed in by the very success that proved his abilities. It was another reminder of how talent doesn't always translate into industry trust. During his son's years, he picked supporting roles in Cold Mountain, 2003, and Children of Men, 2006, small but impactful parts that hinted at his cinematic potential. His true shot came later in Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim, 2013, released just as Sons neared its end. As Raleigh Beckett, he became the emotional anchor of a $400 million sci-fi spectacle. Del Toro publicly praised Hunnam's work, calling him the heart of the film. By all logic, it should have been the breakthrough moment. Yet unlike Chris Pratt, Guardians of the Galaxy, or Jason Momoa, Aquaman, Hunnam didn't get the same industry machine behind him. The pattern was clear. Every time he delivered, the narrative stalled. His performances landed, but the system didn't propel him forward. In an industry where momentum often outweighs merit, Hunnam was proving himself again and again, and still being left on the margins of A-list conversation. That's the irony of Charlie Hunnam's story, not that he lacked the talent, but that Hollywood has repeatedly underestimated it. And that underestimation is precisely what defines him as one of today's most compelling, underrated actors. Stepping onto the big screen, an underrated journey. When Sons of Anarchy thundered through its later seasons, Hollywood began to take notice. Casting directors finally looked past the leather and Harley-Davidson to the man underneath, Charlie Hunnam, an actor whose magnetism could hold both a living room audience and a 40-foot screen. He had the rugged charisma of a leading man, but paired it with a craftsman-like dedication that gave each role weight. On paper, this balance should have placed him alongside the biggest names of his generation. But here is where the story of an underrated actor begins to take shape. The leap from television to cinema has undone many acclaimed TV performers. John Hamm, Michael C. Hall, and others never quite replicated their small screen dominance on the big screen. For Hunnam, the early signs suggested he could buck the trend. Yet time and again, he delivered performances worthy of the A-list, only to receive a muted industry response that didn't match the work. Pacific Rim, 2013. Underrated in the blockbuster arena. When Charlie Hunnam stepped into the lead role of Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim, it was supposed to be the moment Hollywood finally crowned him. As Raleigh Beckett, the battle-scarred Jaeger pilot haunted by the death of his brother, Hunnam wasn't just asked to deliver spectacle. He had to ground a $180 million visual effects extravaganza in something resembling humanity. And he did. His performance combined the disciplined training of an athlete with the wounded gravity of a man wrestling grief, anchoring a story of robots and monsters with surprising emotional weight. Critics at the time pointed out that what could have been a soulless CGI parade worked because Hunnam gave it a beating heart. In interviews, Del Toro emphasized that Hunnam trained like a prizefighter, pushing himself beyond what most actors would endure, because he wanted audiences to feel every bruise, every scar. That commitment showed on screen. He wasn't just piloting a Jaeger. He looked like a man who had lived inside that machine his whole life. Commercially, the film's $400 million worldwide haul was hardly a failure. In fact, it was embraced passionately in Asia, where its themes of honor, sacrifice, and unity resonated deeply. Yet in Hollywood's unforgiving math, success has often been redefined as billion-dollar franchise. Compared to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy or DC's Aquaman, both of which turned Chris Pratt and Jason Momoa into household names overnight, Pacific Rim was framed as good, not great, and in that miscalculation, Hunnam became collateral damage. Industry coverage at the time suggested that Warner Brothers had expected a runaway franchise, and when the film delivered only a cult success, the narrative shifted. Instead of being celebrated for carrying an ambitious, original blockbuster, Hunnam was subtly sidelined, as if his performance mattered less than the spreadsheet totals. Interviews after the release showed him grappling with that reality. He knew he had delivered everything asked of him and more, but the industry was unwilling to grant him the A-list status that other actors received for less. Looking back now, Pacific Rim is often remembered more fondly than its initial reception. Its cult following has only grown, its imagery still iconic. But for Charlie Hunnam, it became a strange paradox. The very film that proved he could lead a global tentpole was also the one that reinforced his place as an underrated actor. Hollywood couldn't see past the numbers, and in doing so, it underestimated the artistry that had made the film work in the first place. The Lost City of Z, 2016. Underrated in prestige cinema. If Pacific Rim proved Charlie Hunnam could carry a global blockbuster, then The Lost City of Z was supposed to be the project that elevated him into the pantheon of serious actors. Directed by James Gray, the film demanded more than charisma or physicality. It required the kind of internal transformation that leaves an actor almost unrecognizable. As British explorer Percy Fawcett, Hunnam delivered exactly that. A portrait of obsession, resilience, and tragic grandeur that some critics quietly described as the finest work of his career. The production itself was grueling. Hunnam immersed himself in the Amazon, enduring isolation, extreme weight loss, and physical punishment to capture Fawcett's descent into obsession. He even cut off contact with friends and loved ones to heighten his sense of loneliness. In interviews, he admitted this process wasn't just method acting, It was self-imposed exile, a way of breaking himself down so that the audience could believe in the man who walked willingly into the jungle, never to return. Critics at major outlets praised his subtlety, noting how he balanced Percy's quiet dignity with an undercurrent of madness. Yet when awards season rolled around, Hunnam's name was conspicuously absent. The film itself was embraced at festivals, but overshadowed by bigger studio campaigns. For comparison, look at Matthew McConaughey in Dallas Buyers Club, or Benedict Cumberbatch in The Imitation Game, roles that were similarly transformative, yet propelled their actors to Oscar stages. Hunnam, despite comparable dedication and execution, found himself sidelined once again. Part of this is Hollywood politics. Prestige recognition often requires the backing of aggressive award campaigns, high-profile studio lobbying, and the kind of media machine Hunnam has always shied away from. Without that apparatus, his performance became another hidden gem, admired by those who saw it, but invisible to the wider audience. And yet, for many critics and cinephiles, The Lost City of Z remains proof that Charlie Hunnam's talents extend far beyond the brooding outlaw image of Sons of Anarchy or the physical bravado of his action roles. It was a masterclass in restraint and intensity, the kind of performance that should have rewritten the narrative around him. Instead, it became another entry in the growing list of reasons he's considered one of Hollywood's most underrated actors, respected, even revered in certain circles, but denied the spotlight his work deserves. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, 2017, a misjudged crown for an underrated actor. Charlie Hunnam once described King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, as a project brimming with ambition, but marred by complications he couldn't control. As he candidly shared in interviews, a lot of things went wrong behind the scenes, and we just didn't quite make the movie we wanted. He even went so far as to state that a piece of miscasting crippled the central storyline, an admission as rare as it was telling. When Warner Brothers tapped Hunnam to lead what was supposed to become a 6-film King Arthur franchise, he didn't just show up. He fought for the role. He flew to London, tea in hand, determined to win over director Guy Ritchie. And win over Ritchie he did, not just through charm, but through willingness to physically transform. Hunnam threw himself into months of sword training, gritty fight choreography, and stunt work so intense it risked more than just cuts and bruises. Despite this dedication, when King Arthur hit theaters, audiences didn't follow. The film grossed a meager $149 million worldwide against a hefty $175 million budget, with marketing costs pushing losses deep into the red. Some estimates suggest over $100 million in the hole. Critics weren't kind either. Many pointed to a muddled vision, confusing editing, and a mythos that felt tired in a post-Game of Thrones world, thirsty for subversive fantasy. It wasn't just unrecognizable, it was out of touch. Why Hunnam became the fall guy, and why it feels like an injustice. In Hollywood, perception often eclipses performance. Stars like Chris Hemsworth, Thor, and Henry Cavill, Man of Steel, were given room to grow their franchise identities despite early criticism or mixed reviews. Hunnam wasn't afforded that luxury. One box office stumble, and the studio pulled the franchise plug, with his performance unfairly tied to the failure, even though the faltering was rooted in script issues, marketing misfires, and miscasting. To many, this encapsulates what it means to be an underrated actor in Hollywood. Capable, obsessed with the material, yet unforgivingly penalized when systems fail. Not because of his own shortcomings, but because he's not the Hollywood default. In short, the King's crown never fit, but not because of Charlie Hunnam's performance. This chapter in his career underscores his broader story. A profoundly talented actor, willing to risk everything for art, yet consistently left on the outside of Hollywood's marquee, not due to lack of ability, but due to a system that values brand over craft. The roles that slipped away. Proof of an underrated path. If there's one thread that defines Charlie Hunnam's underrated reputation, it's not just the roles he played, it's the ones that slipped through his fingers. The most headline-grabbing example was 50 Shades of Grey. When his casting was announced, it set off a media firestorm. That role could have made him a household name overnight, the kind of pop culture phenomenon that locks an actor into global stardom. And yet, Hunnam famously walked away. On the surface, he cited scheduling conflicts with Sons of Anarchy and Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak. But in interviews later, he admitted something deeper. The role didn't feel honest to him. He feared being boxed into a character that didn't align with his instincts, a compromise he has never been willing to make. But the 50 Shades door was far from the only one to close quietly. Around the same era, he was considered for blockbuster-defining parts, including Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars Episode II, a role that could have reshaped his trajectory entirely. He even auditioned for Thor, which ultimately went to Chris Hemsworth, and narrowly missed Green Arrow in the DC universe. He passed on parts in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, admitting later that the role just didn't sit right with his creative instincts. Compare that with contemporaries who took early franchise roles and rode the wave, Hemsworth as Thor, Reynolds with Deadpool, or even DiCaprio in Titanic. These were leapfrog moments. Hunnam, by contrast, consistently chose integrity over instant fame, a hallmark of the understated but unmistakable path of an underrated actor. Behind the scenes, more ambitious projects fell apart, scripts rewritten into oblivion, financing that vanished, studios pulling the plug at the last minute. Hunnam rarely blames these collapses. Instead, he reflects that his career has been shaped by near-miss potential, where circumstances, not effort, kept his name out of the A-list headlines. That's the irony of being underrated. If you chase the bullet train of franchise branding, you may end up mainstream famous but compromise your craft. Hunnam took the slower train, sometimes derailed, sometimes delayed, but always heading toward the performances that meant something. And in that, he may just be among the richest of our generation of actors. Another high-profile near-miss? Zack Snyder's 300. Hunnam was offered the lead but turned it down to star in Children of Men, valuing the artistic integrity of the role over the allure of a commercial hit. And then there was 50 Shades of Grey, a casting that could have skyrocketed him into mass-market superstardom. Hunnam described stepping away from the role as emotionally destructive, driven by a promise to Guillermo del Toro. In a raw admission, he said that the hardest part wasn't the role itself, but calling the director to say he couldn't do it. A phone call that ended in shared tears. These near misses form a pattern that feeds into his underrated label. No matter how big the opportunity, Hunnam has consistently chosen artistry over exposure. In interviews, he's reflected that his career has been one of what could have been, but not because of lack of ability. Rather, it's a testament to an actor who values integrity over instant fame, even if it means Hollywood often moves on without him. In Jungleland 2019, Hunnam stripped away all polish to play a boxing trainer worn thin by life, and in Shantaram 2022, he navigated the moral labyrinth of 1980s Bombay. Neither project dominated headlines, but both revealed a commitment to roles that mattered more than marketability. While his peers chased surefire franchises, Hunnam chose vulnerability, complexity, and authenticity. And that is why Charlie Hunnam sits firmly in the underrated actors conversation. He has the range, the presence, and the discipline to rival any of his contemporaries. But he refuses to play Hollywood's game. His career is less about chasing the crown and more about leaving behind work that, in time, will be recognized for its depth. In a world where fame often rewards the loudest, Hunnam proves that sometimes the most enduring performances come from those Hollywood underestimates the most. Why Hollywood still underrates Charlie Hunnam. By any objective measure, Charlie Hunnam has everything an A-list actor is supposed to have, striking screen presence, a proven range that spans gritty television drama to sweeping cinematic epics, an obsessive commitment to preparation, and a fan base that doesn't just like him, they trust him to deliver. And yet, more than 2 decades into his career, his name still hovers just outside the inner circle of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men. This isn't about lack of talent. This is about a perfect storm of circumstances, choices, and industry blind spots that keep Hunnam in that strange category. Too good to ignore, but somehow still underestimated. The curse of selectivity. Ironically, one of Hunnam's greatest strengths, his integrity, is also one of the main reasons he remains underrated. In an era when actors are encouraged to stay hot by jumping from one project to another, Hunnam refuses to play the quantity over quality game. He's famously selective about his roles, turning down films that don't resonate with him, even when they come with 7-figure offers or the promise of mass-market exposure. This isn't stubbornness, it's strategy. He's looking for scripts that challenge him, characters that scare him, and projects where he can bring something real to the table. In Hollywood's momentum-obsessed ecosystem, disappearing from screens for too long can make audiences and executives forget how good you are. While other actors climb the ladder by saying yes to everything, Hunnam's measured approach often leaves him out of the constant cultural conversation. The missing lightning strike role. Every actor who makes the leap from respected to legendary has that one role, the one that hits critical acclaim and box office gold at the same time. For Matthew McConaughey, it was Dallas Buyers Club. For Robert Downey Jr., it was Iron Man. For Hunnam, that role remains elusive. Pacific Rim proved he could lead a global blockbuster, but it didn't rebrand him as the next action megastar. The Lost City of Z showcased a deeply committed career-best performance, but didn't connect with a wide audience. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, was meant to be his crowning moment, yet became a cautionary tale of studio overreach. This gap, the absence of a single, unifying lightning strike project, means Hunnam's career is a patchwork of impressive work that hasn't coalesced into a defining cultural moment. And in the eyes of Hollywood gatekeepers, that makes him harder to sell as the next big thing. Jax Teller wasn't just a role, it was a phenomenon. Over 7 seasons of Sons of Anarchy, Hunnam created a character so vivid, so morally complex, that he became etched into the cultural memory. But there's a dark side to that kind of impact. Even years after the series ended, casting directors and audiences still see Hunnam through the lens of the leather vest, the Harley-Davidson, and the brooding anti-hero stare. It's the same trap Bryan Cranston faced after Breaking Bad and Jon Hamm after Mad Men. Once you've embodied an era-defining TV character, the industry can struggle to imagine you as anyone else. For Hunnam, it means he has to work twice as hard to prove he's not just Jax Teller in a different costume. And when he does break away into vastly different roles, the projects often don't get the kind of mass attention that would shatter that perception. The Hollywood attention economy. In today's entertainment landscape, visibility often trumps ability. Stars are expected to feed the machine, constant interviews, viral social media presence, paparazzi, friendly personal lives. Hunnam wants no part of that. He avoids social media entirely, rarely appears in tabloid headlines, and prefers to keep his personal life private. While this makes him authentic and grounded, it also means he's absent from the 24/7 news cycle that keeps other actors in the public eye. In a system where out of sight often equals out of mind, Hunnam's low profile works against him in terms of cultural dominance. Film critic Peter DeBruge of Variety once summed it up bluntly. Hunnam is one of the few actors today who's more interested in the work than in the circus around it. But in Hollywood, the circus sells tickets, the fans see it differently. Among his fans, the underrated label isn't an insult, it's almost a badge of pride. On Reddit, fan pages, and online forums, you'll find passionate defenses of his craft. Charlie Hunnam is the best actor you never see on those best actor lists. And maybe that's why he's so damn good. Because he's too busy working on the craft to care about the lists. For these fans, being underrated means Hunnam gets to operate outside the Hollywood hype cycle. He's not tied down to one genre, not forced to chase trends, and not afraid to disappear until the right project comes along. It gives his work an element of surprise. You never quite know where he'll turn up next, but when he does, you can bet he'll be all in. Here's the twist. In some ways, staying underrated has preserved Hunnam's longevity. Without the crushing overexposure that comes with A-list celebrity, he's free to keep evolving, to take risks, to build a career brick by brick instead of burning bright and fast. It's a slower climb, yes, but for Charlie Hunnam, it's a climb on his own terms, and in an industry that often chews up and spits out its brightest stars, that might be the most underrated achievement of all. The legacy so far. Hollywood's most underrated quiet force. Charlie Hunnam's career is the definition of what it means to be underrated in Hollywood. He has all the hallmarks of an A-list actor, the charisma, the dedication, the range. Yet his journey has never been about chasing the spotlight. Instead, it has been about quietly building a body of work defined by risk, resilience, and authenticity. In an industry that rewards noise, Hunnam has chosen silence. And paradoxically, that silence has made him one of the most compelling, underrated actors of his generation. From the rough-edged streets of Sons of Anarchy to the sweeping landscapes of the lost city of Z, Hunnam has resisted the easy, commercially engineered path to superstardom. Unlike his peers who carefully curate a string of box-office hits, he has leaned into unpredictability, valuing challenging roles over predictable franchises. This refusal to compromise is precisely why he's underrated. Hollywood doesn't always know how to reward integrity. For most A-listers, legacy is tallied in Oscars, billion-dollar openings, and media saturation. For Hunnam, it's etched in performances. Subtle, powerful moments that resonate long after the credits roll. The flicker of hesitation in Jax Teller's eyes, the haunted obsession of Percy Fawcett in the Amazon, or the battered resilience of Raleigh Beckett facing kaiju. These aren't mere scenes. They're testaments to lived-in truth. Yet because they lack the headline-grabbing spectacle of Hollywood lightning strike roles, they're often overlooked by the industry machine. Hunnam's commitment to craft has always carried a cost. He trains like a fighter, starves like an ascetic, and isolates himself like a monk to embody his characters. He's turned down lucrative roles because they didn't align with his artistic instincts, walking away from the kind of exposure that could have catapulted him into safe superstardom. In an attention economy where hype often overshadows talent, his authenticity keeps him underrated, but it's also what sets him apart. The missing breakthrough, or the ultimate strength. Critics and fans alike agree that Hunnam has yet to land that single defining breakthrough role that blends cultural impact with commercial dominance. Where McConaughey had Dallas Buyers Club and Downey Jr. had Iron Man, Hunnam's resume is full of almost moments. Pacific Rim, The Lost City of Z, King Arthur. But being underrated has its hidden advantage. It shields him from the crushing cycle of hype and burnout, giving him the freedom to keep evolving. The underrated truth. In a noisy industry, Charlie Hunnam is proof that quiet can still be powerful. His work isn't engineered for algorithms or magazine covers, it's built for longevity. He wears the underrated label like armor, not as a weakness but as a rare form of freedom. Because when the noise fades and only the performances remain, it is often the underrated actors, the ones who worked without compromise, who stand the tallest. Whether Hollywood ever crowns him with the recognition he deserves is almost beside the point. For audiences who value discipline, courage, and craft, Charlie Hunnam's legacy is already secure. He may be underrated, but that is precisely what makes him unforgettable. Still Hollywood's best-kept secret. Charlie Hunnam has the looks, the talent, and the range to stand shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's A-list. Yet he remains one of its most underrated actors. From Sons of Anarchy to Pacific Rim, The Lost City of Z, and beyond, he's proven he can command the screen in any genre. But his career has been defined by near misses, selective choices, and a refusal to play the fame game, qualities that have kept him authentic, but just outside the industry's spotlight. Being underrated hasn't limited him. It's preserved him. It's allowed him to take risks, surprise audiences, and build a legacy on his own terms. And maybe that's the real story here. Not that Charlie Hunnam is waiting for his breakthrough, but that he's quietly crafting it, role by role, until the rest of the world finally catches up. What's your favorite Charlie Hunnam performance? And which underrated actor should we spotlight next?